Good morning. My name is Nicole Figueredo, and I want to thank everyone for joining us this Tuesday morning. We're excited to be here to share some insights from navigating the complexities of capital improvement planning to optimizing asset management and creating sustainable rate structures. Our panel of experts will be discussing best practices to ensure long-term success and resilience. Whether you're refining your existing strategies or developing new approaches, this session offers valuable insights to help shape stronger futures for your community. And joining me this morning, we have Brian Noble, Plainville's Town Administrator. Brian has extensive experience in public administration, finance, and he has a proven track record of successfully managing municipal operations, fostering community development, and navigating the complexities of local governance to drive strategic growth and long-term sustainability. Also joining us is Bob Mackie, Vice President at Beta. Bob brings decades of experience in the design, management, and optimization of water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure, ensuring resilient and sustainable systems that meet both current and future community needs. We are also joined by Steve Horn, an AMI and Technology Solutions Manager in the Smart Utility Solutions team of Everett J. Prescott. Steve has extensive experience in implementing advanced metering infrastructure and cutting-edge technology solutions, helping utilities enhance operational efficiencies, improve data accuracy, and drive smart infrastructure initiatives for long-term sustainability. Michael Schrader, Senior Project Manager for Capital Strategic Solutions, is here as well. Michael has extensive experience in designing innovative water rate structures that balance financial sustainability with community affordability, helping utilities effectively manage resources while ensuring equitable and long-term infrastructure resilience. John DeLuca, Senior Project Manager with Capital Strategic Solutions, is also joining us. John has a wealth of experience in public works, overseeing the planning and development and maintenance of critical infrastructure projects and assuring efficient operations that enhance community services and promote sustainable growth. Now that was a mouthful. To kick off the discussion, I'd like to ask each of you to share from your perspectives on what you see as the biggest challenge currently facing municipalities in terms of infrastructure planning and management, particularly as it relates to water, wastewater, and stormwater systems. I'm going to actually toss that your way, Brian.
Very good. Thank you. I think that the biggest problem is the lack of prior planning and preparation is the biggest problem. I think we tend to, as a community and as a municipality, we're great at building things, and we're just terrible at maintaining them. So that, I think, is the biggest problem, is creating that plan that looks forward and understands the ramifications that are necessary to keep a system, particularly in water and sewer, running efficiently and running clean. The biggest issue. And the second one is always the same problem we have in every community, which is funding. Did we reserve enough money? Did we allocate enough money? Did we plan ahead for the money? So I would say that the first one is planning, the second one is money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're seeing that with a lot of communities across, New England and in the southern states that we're supporting. How do you approach balancing the need for long-term sustainability with the immediate operational and financial demands? Anyone would like to share some insights on that? Question?
I agree with Brian on the funding, and you got to have the rates, you got to have the personnel. The problem we have today out there is the lack of personnel and trying to retain these people for these positions. It is difficult. You got to have a capital plan, a 10-year plan. Your rates have to support that. You have to have emergency funding. And I'm seeing an awful lot of the lack of that in several communities that we've been working at. So we really do need to work and have some sort of training program to enhance these people to come into the industry.
Yeah.
In order to, it's just people turn the water on, or they flush and it goes away, everything's working, so everything's fine. But the lack of maintenance, funding, planning, support from the communities in order to actually get all that done is difficult in itself.
John,
So,
I'll echo that sentiment. I think in my years in the industry, I think one of the things that really changed things was Prop 2.5. When Prop 2.5 came around, communities' funding was greatly reduced in terms of being able to maintain their systems and provide public service. I think, John, you said it, and Brian, you alluded to it, that communities are very short-staffed. Communities are doing the best they can. And a lot of times it's reactive, not proactive. And as long as you stay in that cycle, it's a vicious cycle, and you're never going to get out of it. So until you actually do, find the time to, if you do get a breather from water main break, a sewer break, a pump that's failed, complaints of odors, or whatever it is that's plaguing your water or your wastewater system, I mean, you really do need to do some planning. So bringing in, folks like Steve to get in and collect those assets and take a look at your system, because without diving into your system and looking at the age of your pumps and looking at the condition of your underground pipes and really coming up with that plan that Brian alluded to, that without a strong capital plan, how are we going to go to the taxpayers and say we need X number of dollars, or we need to raise the rates by 10-15% without actually showing them? It's like buying a car, running it for 50,000 miles, not putting any oil in it, and then when the tires fall off, you say, well, we don't have money to put the tires back on. So you have to maintain it. And an asset management approach is really the brains of a capital improvement plan. I don't know if Steve, if you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think with the new EPA requirement with the lead service inventory, a lot of cities and towns have been mandated to really look at their data. I have a meeting this week with a city that we only have 15% of the data for their pipes. And going into that meeting, it's going to be a tough meeting for both of us, that your data has been non-existent. And I think this will help people understand that, okay, this is the age of my pipe, this is the age of my hydrants, this is the age of different infrastructure, and that will allow, I think that's actually been a blessing. I know it's been costly for cities and towns to do this lead service line inventory, but I think this has been the start of, listen, you need to get your data correct. You need to see the infrastructure age, and then goes back down to compliance. And Mike Schrader and I were talking a little bit about regulatory compliance and how important that is. And with clean data, you're going to be able to meet those needs much easier. So Mike, I'll throw it over to you regarding that compliance aspect of it.
Well, so from a rate perspective, the mantra that you'll hear all the time is to fund the complete cost of service, or the full cost of service. And I think what happens is that the municipalities have been in this sort of starvation diet, or this winnowing over the years, where certain things they just don't talk about anymore, and they're just looking at, the last year's budget says their needs there, and the capital plan, which vary in detail and approach. I think what we need to do is, a lot of times I see, is take a step back and say, okay, what are we trying to do, or what are the goals of the the raison d'etre of running a water system? And like you said, it's primarily regulatory compliance is one of your first things, and that applies to water quality, safety, and all that, but also maintaining continuity of service for your customers, because losing water service that Bob, you mentioned, they flush and forget, whatever. If they don't, then it's a big deal. Consequential damages or business disruptions, or losing transportation intersections, whatnot, to fails on sewer and water, and being able to meet your community's needs over the long term, so that the master plan committee is looking at, we want to be here, make sure the water department, the sewer department are planning the same way. So circling back to, I think what Brian said, you're going to come into, it's easy to say it is what it is, but you're going to have to make decisions. And the best way to make those decisions, in my opinion, are at the risks of those things. Well, you know, so you're explaining to someone, this is why we need to do it. And by the way, this is what might happen if we don't. And you can, you know, sort of enter that risk perspective in your capital planning to say, geez, I don't know how much longer that's going to last, but boy, if that goes, that's right in the middle of everything. I don't want to see that. We can fix it on a, you know, on our time in a much better way than I can if it happens during the Memorial Day parade, you know. So that's how I look at it, is try to encourage communities to step back and say, are we doing what we need to do, and work with your stakeholders to you know, get them to understand this. And I'll end with one of the thoughts I thought doing this is water and sewer, public water and sewer, the only industry I can think of where you have to get permission from your customers to charge them more than you did last year for the same service. That's a, you know, you really need to put in the work and show them, this is why we think this was important. This is what might happen. This is what we're preventing, and get them on board.
So we
And
do
that-
have a question from our audience. Bob, did you want to add to that? And then we'll take the question.
I was just going to say that Mike brings up a great point. A lot of this is public perception and gaining the trust of the public and public outreach. I mean, it's a huge component of all of this.
Yeah, I often say the unseen is also the underfunded. I think I've said it in almost every presentation that we give. When we're talking to, I mean, we all know what's beneath the ground, but as long as the water turns on and the toilet flushes and goes away, nobody really cares about it until something goes wrong.
Takes a lot to keep it invisible.
Yeah, exactly. Darla, I've unmuted you. You can ask your question.
Good morning. My name is Darla Bonk and I'm from Fort Myers, Florida. And I'm a city council member and also have lived here just about all of my life. And all of the things that you just have talked about that a lot of municipalities can imagine might happen, we have just experienced to the point where for a period of about 8 months, we had to actually buy water from our county because the wells had not been taken care of or maintained. You know, deferred maintenance became now to the tune of about a $500 million plant expansion, new expansion, replacing the trains, replacing all of the things, bringing in a lot of makeshift due to improve the quality of water. And also we were dealing with PSI levels that fell well below what the health department required, which is why we had to buy water from the county. My question to you all is that, you know, from largely the impact to those waters and those water breaks happened from poor pipe installation, overlooking inspections during post-recession when developers were being begged to come back and build, as we all know those stories. And now, you know, here we are paying the price and trying to replace those pipes as they break. From the data perspective with EPA requirements, where we do not know where all of our valves are, we're going all the way through the piping. Oh, there's a valve. Let's plot that. I'm finding that from the staff perspective, there is huge resistance when we have brought in, hey, you can do a tracking system from here. We brought in people from John Deere with systems, you know, with the SCADA systems and ways to know in real time what is happening so we can prevent. We're fixing a very costly mistake, but let's also prevent this from happening in the future. As a partner with staff and municipalities and as an elected, we do a great job now of communicating to the taxpayer rate increase. Here's why, here's what it's going to do. You're not going to keep getting all these breaks. We've had 11 breaks in the last 6 months in one area. How can I help staff, when they are obviously the engineers, understand that there are some, I don't want to say common sense, that's not the right word, but you all will understand my heart with this. there's some ways where we can prevent this. If it means you need us to approve another $2 million so we can now know immediately when a break is happening, where all these valves are. Let's get some data points so we can truly map out what's happening. How can I be a better partner with them, help them, encourage them, but also say we're overlooking something that red tape, as we all know, in government can become very costly down the road. If that question makes any sense.
It does make a lot of sense, Darla, and I don't think that you're the alone in feeling that. I'm going to kind of kick this to Mr. Mackie or Mr. Horn. Actually combined, those two combined entities, Beta and EPG, just to kind of talk about their experience. And
Well, Darla, it's a great comment, but I guess I need a little more specificity on your question. So is your question really, how do you gain the trust of your staff? Or how do you get your staff to come out of their comfort zone and say, this is what we need, and not be fearful of ramifications?
Yeah, great clarifying question. So the trust is there.
Okay.
We've gone through this in the last 3 years. So I think we've been in these trenches now together, but it's in understanding, okay, now that we're on the upswing of this and we're getting the trust back from the public, they see we're fixing the problem. That doesn't mean we're home free. We still have pieces of this that we have not outlined to ensure this does not happen again. And we've realized we don't know all of the things of where our valves are and where our piping's laid. And we've got everything from a 120-year-old city. So we've got 100-year-old piping, cast iron piping, to, you know, this new piping that can handle greater pressure, but in the older sections, it can't. So we've found that what's the median PSI that will work. But in terms of when a break happens, I am still having to wait for someone to drive out to where we think the break is, verify, yes, there's a break. It's now been an hour or 90 minutes before notification is going out to people, hey, you guys are going to need to start boiling your water. But they want to have everything all done before that notification system is going out, and also plot still manually where these issues are, rather than as we go, why aren't we creating data sets? Why aren't we, electronifying this data, rather than manually still having this information in the hands of these two engineers who know everything. We understand all the history of it. Let's just fix it and move on, but let's do it the right way.
So is part of this needing a work order system where that would tie into your GIS, which would then be populating information about your system as time is moving on? Because I know a lot of communities have that. Like John, you had that, I believe, in Framingham when you were with the city of Framingham, where, you know, if there was a break, even though that's a bad situation, as long as you're able to isolate it and stop the leak, you could get in and now actually get some good information about a pipeline that maybe you couldn't see before.
Right.
And then from that, you create a work order, you get the work done, and then that would populate into a GIS database. Steve, is that something that you want to jump in on, or?
Yeah, I've got a few questions for you too, Dollar. Do you have a work order system?
Yes, there's a work order system, and there are things that are starting to populate into the GIS system. And maybe that's the only process, is that it's as a break happens, we're able to populate that data. Is there not any other way to go in and holistically, either with our consultants or with our hired engineers, to say, map out where all of our piping is, where the valves are? I mean, is there not a way to do that aside from waiting for a break? That's the question. Is there not a way to do this aside from waiting for a break?
Yeah.
You can definitely do that.
Okay.
Steve, did you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I think I think some people run into personnel issues too, and that may be one of your concerns. What I've seen cities and towns do is take one of two people and saying, you're gonna map out every manhole, catch basin, hydrant, valve, meter, and we're gonna build that database. And it may take a while. Other people have done interns, summer interns, where they grab 1 or 2 kids and say, go down the street. But getting clean data is going to be your first step. And
Or
it
you
adds,
hire, or you hire a consultant, Steve.
or you could hire,
Some
correct.
communities just don't have the resources. I mean, we've had many projects where, in fact, Framingham was one of them. We went out and we actually GPSed everything, all the hydrants, all the gate valves, mapped everything out. And actually, we were working with the city. I bring it up because everything we talk about was happening in the city when we were working with them, and we still are. When we created a water model, that's actually how we found a lot of their valves. Because in going in and isolating sections of the system and doing flow testing so that we could evaluate the condition of the pipe, C-value testing and such, we would shut off a valve, and next thing, one of the main drags in the city, all the businesses along there are out of water, even though the map shows no, that shouldn't be the case. So I found that mapping by itself is good to a point, but you really do need to go in and do some flow testing, because that will definitely tell you, if you shut a valve and you think you're only affecting one area, and the next thing you're getting phone calls from another area. It's really a puzzle. It's really going in and delving into the puzzle and trying to figure out where all the pieces are. And you're right, a lot of these systems were built without any supervision, and that's not just your system. That's New England. Up here we see it everywhere. And Steve alluded to, yes, exactly. And Steve alluded to it with the service cards. I mean, the database or the 2 senior people on the staff that have now retired, but they knew where every service was, every bend, every fitting. And when they left, you lost all of that institutional knowledge. Yeah. So it is, Dana, I would say it is really kind of a holistic approach to your issue. And you're not alone. Yours is kind of on a bigger scale, but communities deal with this on a regular basis. And it's really going in and trying to map that system. Steve gave you some good ideas on that. So you can either do it in-house, you can do it external, you map it, but you can't just stop there. You're going to have to do some testing of that model, I won't say model, but your distribution system, to see if those valves are truly doing what you need them to do. In other words, shutting off a specific area. And then also with the valves even working. You got to make sure you test your valves, you test your hydrants, because you don't want to be testing them during a major break or fire.
Right.
Even I have talked about this a number of times, but they have these valve turner, a valve exerciser machine that can mount on a hitch of a truck, and it has a GPS receiver. So you get a location, you get the number of turns, which gives you a pretty good idea of the diameter, and you also maybe get some operating knowledge on it. But I've done UDF programs for communities, and they come back and they said, we found we had 27 closed valves, because it's the middle of the night and you're shutting down stuff, whatever, they forget to turn one on. But Darla, I also wanted to mention that you said what you could do for your guys, your crew, is I would get them some asset management training, because it makes you think along, what are the chances of something happening and what are the consequences of that thing happening. And what you find is that when you look at these systems, we think of it in terms of what we call cohorts, where a cast iron pipe laid at a certain age in certain materials will behave similarly, and you can treat them, and you're never going to know, you're never going to be able to predict the next one exactly, but you can say, geez, we've had 14 breaks on this, these lines that were installed in this time. Let's do this, and let's be proactive.
Yeah, and I think part of your question too, Darla, is you had mentioned about managing expectations of your community members, where they felt like, they had been out there for an hour and this should have been fixed already. Having worked in Pinellas County Utilities, I'm very familiar with the notification systems down in Florida, and having moved down there. I think it's getting the messaging out there saying that you're investigating a potential water main break or a leak within your system. It may be impacting this area. Please stay tuned and have them sign up for your messaging systems. And that's something that worked very well, and it works very well in the communities that we serve, is starting off with the initial notification and then kind of following up and giving them a level of expectation that this is when we're going to follow up with you, with more information and managing those expectations. And it kind of also provides that public notification, but it kind of puts them on notice that, yeah, this is an area we've looked at. And it's a way for you as well to
Brian
collect
speaking.
data on how many breaks that you've had in a
Can you print
particular
it for me?
area.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.
No, it's fabulous questions, and thank you for interacting with the panel. This is what makes it more interesting and fun, is when our audience dives right in with us in these conversations. And with that, I'll ask the audience if they have any more questions, or, you know, maybe throw a couple more questions that I have in the queue at my panel. I'll give you a minute. So it kind of, I keep thinking about some of these questions that, you know, I had thought of coming into this, and I want to ask the panel itself is, can you discuss some innovative funding strategies, including private-public partnerships for capital improvement projects and water infrastructure, or some other funding strategies that you've seen in the past that communities have implemented over the years to help them get through their systems? And I'm kind of looking at Brian maybe for this question. Brian? Do you have any-
Certainly. Well, actually, to be honest with you, there's no secret to success. We go hunting for grants, and we go hunting for zero interest loans. We stand in line. We scour everything we possibly can to find somebody else's money to spend. But the direct answer to the question is nothing is as reliable as your own source of funding. Making sure that you create your town budget or your city budget, in the case of Fort Myers, because you dwarf me. But consequently, you have to start setting some money aside much more regularly and consistently, because this problem simply isn't going to go away. The city's going to age, the infrastructure is going to age. So you need to start putting it away. Now, in Massachusetts, as Bob had mentioned earlier, we have Proposition 2.5, which restricts how fast or how much the tax levy can increase, which sounded great at the time that we voted it, but somehow it has become that if you can't manage with only a 2.5% increase every year, well, then obviously you're mismanaged. So with inflation running, right now at 3%, but having recovered from 9 and 10%, it didn't like the price didn't go back to what it was before. So we're now dealing with far more expensive construction than ever before, and we're just not prepared for that in a budget sense. So consequently, we look to the state, we look to the federal government for those additional sources of funds to complete necessary maintenance of a system that, for us, we installed, in 1905, and I guess apparently we never thought we'd have to replace it. So consequently, we're dealing with very similar problems that Dollar is dealing with in Fort Myers.
Yeah.
I get something to add to that too, Brian. I'm a vendor, supply product, and it used to be back in the day, hey, we're going to do a 3-year bid, we're going to do a 3-year RFP, and our company has been reluctant to enter into those bids because even us, we see price increases, especially right after COVID, that we couldn't meet the bids that we made before. And it was lucky we had good relationships and sat down with people. But what we're seeing on the streets now, if we see a 3-year bid, we're very reluctant to even place a bid on that because the cost of materials, cost of labor is getting increasingly more expensive. So with the audience, you need to be cognizant of that as well.
Okay.
Maybe build escalators to be fair to both your constituents, but also the vendors and the people who are doing the project.
No, that's a definitely great point, Steve, because what we've seen in the water infrastructure industry is like Bob and I and Brian, we've been out there, presenting, doing a presentation for the water treatment plant in Plainville, and there's a graph that we have that shows from like right around, what was it, Bob, like 2017, 2019, it was like
Right.
here, and then it's way up here now, and you're looking at like the increase, and you're like, wow, it's been a big hit, and getting those supplies and materials. I mean, as we all look down the road with the EPA's new drinking water regulation for PFAS, it's going to impact 66,000 public drinking water suppliers across the nation. I think everybody's going to be diving in, trying to get, you know, the same materials, the same equipment, the same, you know, valves and all those same supplies. So it is, you know, it's going to be a bit of a challenge. And that's where I think that capital improvement planning ties into your asset management program as well as your rates, so that your community is not blindsided. And then, you know, also continuing those conversations with the public. So I do have a question, and it's ties right into this, is how do you build trust with the public to help them understand what the funding is really needed to improve these systems? And I think, you know, that's kind of a little bit in Capital's wheelhouse, but I'm going to actually ask this question to Mr. Noble, because he's in the throes of it on, you know, not just in the public infrastructure area, but also in town management and other budgetary items.
Fine, I guess we'll start with the obvious thing. I haven't seen as much distrust of public officials and government in my career, except what's occurred since basically 2020 to now. And it boils down to the local level on the basis that that's what the public can see, touch, feel, get a hold of. And it's put quite a burden on us for you know, increasing our efforts of transparency and just regular day-to-day communication. The problem I've always had with this is government is broadcasting, but is the constituency tuning in? They seem to be only interested when it hits their pocketbook directly, or when they turn on the faucet and they get dirty water or no water. This is a very significant concern to us, because here in New England, we rely, of course, on the traditional New England town meeting. So we really do expect an educated electorate to come into the meeting. They form the legislative branch of our government. So it's concerning to me when they only can be communicated in sound bites. The minute that you have to simply say, oh, let me explain this to you, you've lost the argument. And the most disappointing thing for me is that we've run a series of outreach programs with Capital Strategic to talk about the sewer program, the water treatment program, getting my subjects mixed. And we've had 40 minutes, we've had reasonable attendance, not great, but the most engagement we had was a 1 minute and 30-second cartoon that we ran on Facebook that explained the issue very succinctly, and apparently that got quite some traction, more so than our outreach meetings, and delivered the message much faster than what we did in 40 minutes. And that seemed to be satiating to the public, that they got it in 1 minute and 30 seconds, what's been taking us a year to put together for a communication program, and 4 outreach meetings I could have skipped if I knew that they just wanted a cartoon.
Yeah, the ways that people communicate is so far, it's insane. I mean, I explained to a lot of people, there's a lot of information coming at us all at one time. And I think what the pandemic did was burn out a lot of people from the social media pages and all of that, all the ways that they were once absorbing information. Now it's just kind of, I feel like it's kind of bouncing off of people until there's something small and flashy that says, look at me. And in Plainville's case, it happened to be the animated video that we worked with the town on. In other communities, we went out and did boots on the ground, and we do pop-up events, and we show up and bring brochures and flyers and have conversations with people. I mean, it's a different success rate in every different community. And it just depends on your audience as well. So I have a question that kind of relates back to Darla's question previously. What are the best practices for integrating a GIS system in real time with real-time monitoring data as far as water asset management goes? And I think this would be a great question for Steve and Bob.
Yeah, I think one town they did, they spent some resources to get their data correct. And we sort of alluded to that, but one thing that really happens once you get that foundation built and now you're going out into the field to flush that particular hydrant or exercise in that particular valve, that starts retaining other information. And as this particular city did this, their data, their systems, their ability to understand what is needed became better and better and better. So when you're exercising all your hydrants, you can take that data and say, this was low flow, this is low pressure, what have you. And that gave the ability to say, hey, we need 47 hydrants this year now. We're probably going to need 23. So on a budgetary standpoint, on a capital strategic standpoint, it's much better. And Bob, you've probably seen this in real time as well in your travels.
I have, and I would echo what you just said, Steve. The only thing I would add to that as well would be one thing I've seen a lot of systems moving toward are live leak detection, meaning they've got sensors out in the system. They've got their commercial and residential water meters are all connected to a fixed system so that sitting in your office as a manager, you can actually see on a daily basis that this meter is now 10 times higher than it should be. So there must be a break inside the home. The transmitters in the system, that leak detection, you could see that there's something going on in the system, that there's a leak, which could help you to really kind of maintain your system more on a live basis. Now that requires a big capital outlay. So to get to that point, you really need to build, your system as much as you can. So back to what we've been saying, you got to map the system. You got to know where all your valves are. You got to know where the fittings are. You got to know the conditions of your pipes, the age of your pipe. Get as much of that information as you can. Create that asset management system. Whether it's something simple on a spreadsheet or something a little more complex, something that says Steve would back with his services. And then from that, you create a capital improvement plan that down the road, maybe you can include those into your system.
So Bob, I think you just gave me a little softball here, and I appreciate the softball. So
I'll let you hit it out of the park, Steve.
I don't know. It was maybe back in the day, but I being in the metering industry, seeing the fixed networks, there is a lot of data that's coming in to cities and towns. A lot of the data, you put KPIs, key performance indicators on that screen, so you can say, hey, this is a flag, this is not a flag. But the other thing, Darla, you tie that into now customer portals. So all this information, hey, there's a leak in your house, that can be a flag, and immediately someone can get an email, someone can get a text message. There's a lot of different ways technology today is hitting your constituents to be a little bit more proactive. And what that in turn does is you're not getting the phone calls, hey, why is my water is low pressure, or why is my bill high? So the customer service people aren't answering as many phone calls. And I see that you've raised your hand, Dollar. So, I'm going to give it back to Nicole, being our.
Darla, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Sorry for monopolizing the questions, but I've
That's
got a
okay.
question for Brian and then also for Stephen with this. So back in terms of the capital stacking of this, of making this all work, one of the things that we have found traction in of really starting to rebuild that trust with the community is not just we're fixing the problem, but then we're also backtracking. Okay, let's go back to our master water plan, which hadn't been updated since 2002. We spent 18 months redoing that with AECom. So then how does that then impact our master comprehensive plan for the overall city? How does that impact our charter? Really, where does that, how do we build in that accountability throughout the entirety of the city and how we operate, including and creating a maintenance program? And what does that look like? How often? How many more wells do I need to build so I can build in well maintenance program? If I have to bring a well down, what can my, what's my gallons per day still staying at to be able to accommodate that? And I love the question, the suggestion about the notification system in the portal, because everything is still very manual with that. And we're also in the process of bringing online in the next 3 years an overall comprehensive ERP system for the entirety of the city, because every department is working in silos with their own system. My question, Brian, would be in these, and then Bob, you mentioned something about a live something system, that as something is happening, that's what I'm also looking for, to make sure that we're including that with our engineers. Black and Beach, I think, is who we're using, but really making sure we're looking at this in totality and not just where the breaks are, and not just saying, oh, well, they were developed and built and put into caprock, and as you know, the water is vibrating, all of that, the caprock is breaking. From all of that holistically and what we're creating, Brian, what was the system, or was that internal that you guys created, that kind of a video piece, which unfortunately that's the attention span, and and we're an older community. I am half the age of my constituency, who I think just, bless her heart, let's put her in the role and see how she does, kind of a deal. But as a business owner, I'm looking at this from okay, what's my investment and what's the ROI I'm going to get back on this? And that seems to be, a foreign language in the government world of this. But I think I'm seeing a more holistic approach that we can take on this. But there's little pieces you guys keep mentioning where I'm like, okay, what is that? What is that? And how do I go and effectively making sure that's part of the contract, such as going in, whether it's through our consultants that we have to check where these valves are and map out our entirety of the system. Are those people, like, how do I know those people are equipped and able to do that? And how would I be messaging that, Brian, back to the utilities guys? Hey, are we doing this? Are we doing that? How are we doing that without them immediately getting on the defensive, which seems to be what happens? Because I'm curious enough to ask the questions that I don't know. I'm not challenging. I'm trying to just make sure, if we're going to invest 500, 700 million bucks in this in the next 7 years, let's do it all, and let's do it all the right way. Well,
you got several questions in.
Sorry.
The first thing I would simply say, in terms of community to your constituency, and having parents that were formerly residents of Fort Myers and in that age group, one of the things that I would that blows my mind about Fort Myers is the average age is my parents' age in the community. But surprisingly, they're on Facebook.
Yep.
And they're far more computer literate than I would have given them credit for.
Yeah.
And so they will look at social media posts, but you have to communicate where they are. They're not coming to you. So that means you're going to have Snapchat chat presence and Facebook presence, and you name it. Once you get into social media, it becomes expansive. And I can give you some governments around me that have done an exceptional job of exploiting social media. I don't have that budget. I'm the guy who does social media in my community. But this cartoon that I referred to was an idea from Nicole. So I give her credit. I thought it was a particularly dumb idea, but I didn't see it had any particular value. But then again, I'm old and crummy. And Nicole taught me a real lesson here by producing an outstanding short commercial that just drove the point home. So, you can treat an old dog, you can show an old dog new tricks, and he'll learn. I am blown away with how quickly it was produced. I'm blown away with how effective it has been at its communication. So that's the first answer to your question. The next one, which is your employees, and how do you motivate your employees to be professional, take responsibility, and care about their job? When you learn how to do that, would you please let me know? And we're not the only, industry that's suffering with the employee situation. Failure to engage, failure to be responsible, an attitude that seems to be more pervasive. Think about the defense industry complaining that they can't get enough skilled or responsible employees to build ships and planes and submarines and all the things that we need for our nation's defense. Look, for example, at the problems Boeing's having in quality control. When people's lives are on the line, they can't even get their employees to, put the screw in properly, knowing that when this bolt falls out of the plane, so the plane falls out of the sky. So, if you find the solution on how to get people to care, money, but I have never seen that money is a complete motivator. There's been only a few people in my life that have been solely and only motivated by money to do the job. Job satisfaction is part of it. Employee involvement is part of it. I can tell you that a DPW employee responds differently to a contract than the treasurer collector of your community and a contract. Sometimes putting incentives into the contract doesn't work because, they're not looking for incentives. They're just looking for a paycheck. So you sort of have to tailor your thinking a little differently. And if you do find the way to motivate municipal employees in a traditional setting, we'll elect you president.
No, thank you.
I think Brian brought up a lot of great points, and I will only add to it is make your employees part of that, part of the process. And when they're feeling clued in and they're feeling engaged in what's happening in the community that they serve, then they can carry that messaging out into the field with them. Just a little background, I was also a public employee for a number of years. And it really helped when I became a PIO to share the news with the employees. Then you share it with your select board and then with the community at large and your media to get that messaging out. It's a layered approach. And that way everyone feels encompassed. And Brian's right, our parents your audience may be older, but there are ways to reach them. I think in Florida, it's for the most part, when I was down there, Nextdoor was the really, it was the big one. Those conversations in Nextdoor and the targeting that Nextdoor allows when you're trying to engage a specific area, especially for a water main break or a sewer main break, is key. So I know the pitfalls that you're going through right now, Darla. A question that we did get was, how do you move from year-to-year budget planning to planning for real future needs with a particular realistic plan for actual costs with rate structures that address the system needs? So I think, Mike, I'm going to throw that right into your wheelhouse and see what you
can. That's a great question. And we generally see, two categories of situations when people are looking for, that kind of work or rate evaluations. And there's, the ones that don't are the ones that are just chugging along. Everything's, hunky dory, and they're just going up with the cost of living and inflation and, adjusting their rates. That's pretty straightforward. The one that we get engaged with more is when there's been I call it a disruptor, where they have a need for something significant that's going to change their costs, their annual costs, 2 or 3-fold over the next 5 years. And that requires you to kind of look open-mindedly at both. On the expense side, it's pretty straightforward. It's not pretty straightforward, but it's more defined. What you need to do, what your costs have been trending. Taking that outside look at what are we doing everything that we need to do to operate this water or sewer system is challenging for sure. And should come into the picture, but you develop, in my opinion, the other thing that comes into play here is people talk about capital improvement plans all the time. And when you get into the rates and that side of it, it's more granular. It's cash flow year by year. So when someone says, replace, Main Street water pipe, $3 million. It's like, well, we're looking at that. Well, the design is going to be the year before. We're going to fund that differently. Then we'll put this out to debt. This is when the debt service is going to hit. And you're looking at that on a year by year basis. And you also want to have some type of indicator in there relative to priority or risk, which would come out of an asset management report. And then you look at your revenue side. And again, I like to just take everything and throw it off to the side and say, forget everything. Let's look at what you have. Let's look at what you have for a customer base, what your community looks like, and what are the potential sources of revenue. Remembering that when we're dealing with public utilities, the goal is not to charge money for a project. It's to recover a cost from that customers, from the people who receive benefit from that in a way that represents their cost causation, keeping in mind that it's not only how much water you do use, but it's how much water you can use. And anybody that's a water superintendent can tell you, on a sunny afternoon in the summer, they're sweating it, wondering what's going to happen if everybody opens everything at once, So having said that, you look at, rate. I look at rate structures as being tailored to kind of like a suit, like, we all wear the same generally kind of clothes, but they're tailored to fit that individual based on, the specifics of that community's profile and what their user base looks like. And then you come up with a 5-year projection for both expenses and revenues. And the part that is important is that there's 2 big traps you can fall in. One, and I feel the reason I got into this, by the way, is because it was so hard for clients to get what they need. I'm a water sewer engineer from way back, and it just blew my mind how hard it was. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, is if you underestimate your capital costs, which is very easy to do because people are afraid. They're afraid to really say what we really need and really put it on the table. Because of the pushback they've gotten in years prior, and you go through it, it's always going to be a bit of a battle, and you work with your stakeholders, you come through, and you didn't carry enough money. That's no good. And then second is when you look at usage projections, that's the revenue side of your pro forma, and you want to be conservative on both sides, but yet you want to be realistic, because if you over project usage, then it's like the treasurer collectors waiting for checks that never come, and the rates aren't making the money that they're supposed to, yada yada yada. So and then I think a key part that's in there too is that it's an iterative process, and you say, well, okay, that doesn't look there's an issue here or whatever, let's tweak that. And so on both sides, I believe in putting in placeholders and escalators and whatnot that you can be completely transparent about, and then tweak them as you go. So if you're looking, I'm going to pick Darla, that you're looking at that planning at your utility, you're like, well, I don't know. So if you're looking at 5 years or more, you put in some placeholders, and then the goal is you identify what your vulnerable points are. Like, we don't know anything about those cast iron mains. I don't want to hear about another water break. So you start doing an evaluation. And if you don't have any records, maybe you dig a couple test pits and you pull out a coupon and see what it looks like. And then you can say, all right, we're planning to replace, blah, 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 these phases of that. And then each year as you go, you're replacing, giant placeholder estimates or contingencies with better data. And it's an iterative process where you keep refining it and then be transparent. And part of the reality is, we talk about computers and GIS and asset management. It's wonderful. the truth is, there's a certain amount of uncertainty you don't know, you have to deal with. And, we used to joke that you look at two pipes and you say, well, I don't know how much longer that's going to last, but boy, when it goes, it's going to be a mess. So you move that up. I mean, that's the way, if anyone's looked at TV inspections of old clay pipes, you know what I'm talking about. You can't, it's hard to tell. So it's weaving in all of that in an honest and straightforward way. And, I tell people we use a transparent and defendable or explainable process to say, I'm not sure either, but this is what we assume, this is what we built in, this is how we're looking at it. And it makes it easy for people to react to and say, well, I think that's a little low. Okay, we'll tweak it. And you come up with something that that works. And to be honest with the asker here, some situations you look at, you say, wow, there's not going to be an easy answer here. This is the part of the invisible infrastructure is, people pick up the phone and want someone else to deal with it. And I think, well, if you had a leak in your roof, we'd be calling up the government saying, Brian Noble, come fix my roof. It's leaking. It's like, it's your roof, it's turning it into a community decision together. Like it seems to be with schools, like people are thinking about those needs collectively. It's understanding what do we need. And then what gets even harder, as Nicole and I have talked about, is how to get people in towns that aren't fully served by their water or sewer, like not every property is connected, to understand that they're getting value from that too, that, in their downtown and all that. So I don't know how good of an answer that was, but there's a lot to it.
There is a lot to it, Mike, and I think that the long and the short term of that, what you were saying was basically you're just going to have to continue to massage the data, continue to look at your assets, your infrastructure. You're going to work with your professionals, like, your engineering consultants, maybe it's a beta, and you're going to work with your asset management team from, Steve's team at EJ Prescott, and work with the town administrators and managers as well, so that they're well aware of the condition of your infrastructure. And then you're going to have to reevaluate year after year based on what you've learned over that year. It's kind of like a lessons learned type of situation. And you're also going to be very transparent and have sharing that information, whether it's through your, those email blasting systems, your social media channels, your Facebook pages, your websites, and pretty much really just massaging that data year after year so that they know what's coming, or they can plan for those pitfalls. A lot of the times when we talk to community members, we explain your city, your town is basically like your home.
Right.
When you look for that city or town that you want to purchase your home, and you look at the bones, you're looking at your water infrastructure, that's your plumbing, you're looking at your overhead electrical lines or your buried electrical lines, that's your electrical, and your structure is your roadways and your sewer and your stormwater systems. And you want to make sure that they're in good condition, and that's an investment year over year, much like that you make of your home. With that, we're at the 10 o'clock hour, and I know that we all have work to do. So I'm going to ask if anybody has any takeaways they want to leave the audience with. If not, then we're going to sign off. And if any of our audience members have any questions, they can feel free to email us, and we'll be happy to share all of our experts' contact information.